Good evening. Sadiq Khans says he wants to establish a new commission to look into how to tackle drug-related crime, including the possibility of decriminalising cannabis. But the Prime Minister's spokeswoman says he has no power to do that. He was setting out his vision for the capital ahead of the mayoral election on May the 6th. Our political correspondent Simon Harris reports.
London is still in lockdown, but political campaigning is allowed, which meant some deft footwork by the mayor to obey social distancing rules during a visit to an after-school club in Camden. Sadiq Khan launched his manifesto today and told Londoners if they re-elect him, he'll set up a drugs commission to make recommendations on whether cannabis should be allowed.
What I'm going to do, should I be re-elected as mayor, is bring together a group of experts in a number of areas to look into whether we should be legalising cannabis. I'm particularly
Do you
concerned...
favour legalising cannabis?
Well, I think we should look into it. We shouldn't prejudge the outcome of the Independent Drugs Commission.
The mayor's main rival, Conservative candidate Sean Bailey, has yet to publish his manifesto. He doesn't think much of the Khan plan.
Why is the mayor wasting our time and our money on something that he has no powers to deliver? This commission won't make anybody safer in London. It won't give anybody a place to live. He needs to focus on what he can deliver. I think this is a trick to make us not focus on the fact that he's failed to deliver any progress in London at all.
But among the other major parties, there is enthusiasm for decriminalising some drugs.
Cannabis policing takes up an enormous amount of time. It could be better spent building up stronger local communities, working to prevent crime. We know the war on drugs has failed. We don't need another review to look at that.
The Liberal Democrats have long argued that cannabis should be legalised, so I'm glad if the mayor's finally starting to look at that option. But we know from his poor record in office that he says a lot and doesn't do very much. So we'll wait to see, won't we?
Sadiq Khan's manifesto includes commitments to end rough sleeping in London, build 10,000 council homes and extend the ultra-low emissions zone in October. Noticeably absent from Sadiq Khan's manifesto this time is any promise of a fares freeze. 5 years ago it was his most controversial policy, with a price tag of £640 million. But with Transport for London now relying on government handouts to stay afloat, the mayor has no room to manoeuvre when it comes to setting fares.
And that's one of the reasons why I'm saying the choice of May the 6th is quite clear. A mayor who stands up for Londoners versus a Tory mayor who'll be in the pocket of the government.
Do you regret you can't freeze fares again?
I do.
1 month today, Londoners will have their say on who gets to run City Hall for the next 3 years.
And this is the full list of the candidates running for Mayor of London in the elections on May the 6th. The list is also available on our website. Just search for ITV London. 2 teenagers who killed an 18-year-old with machetes in what's being described as a savage gang murder have been sentenced to life in prison. Santino Angelo Demeter was stabbed to death in August 2019 in Newham by Raheem Anderson and a 16-year-old boy. Both were wearing electronic tags for previous offences. After the murder, Anderson attempted to cover his tracks by changing his clothes and moving between hotels. Police searching for missing student Richard Okorogeye have found a body in Epping Forest. Richard, who is 19, left his family home in West London 2 weeks ago. The body is yet to be formally identified. Next tonight, a patient who rang 999 from his hospital bed after he was refused oxygen would not have died if medical staff had recognised his symptoms and acted sooner. That's the conclusion of an inquest. Evan Nathan Smith died at North Middlesex Hospital 2 years ago. The 21-year-old was having a sickle cell crisis and needed a blood transfusion. Katie Barnfield reports.
I've not stopped weeping, seriously. I cry myself to sleep sometimes.
2 years ago, Betty and Charles lost their only son. Evan was just 21 when he died in a hospital corridor after doctors missed opportunities to save his life.
The doctors came rushing in and they were trying to stabilise him, but I knew.
I don't know what to say, but I'm really saddened by the care he received. I'm really saddened, and I think they could have done better.
Evan had sickle cell disease and had what's known as a sickle cell crisis after what should have been a routine operation. He recognised the signs himself and asked for oxygen, but was refused. At one point, he was so worried, he called 999 from his hospital bed to see if they could help him. Today, the inquest into his death found a string of failures in the care provided to him at North Middlesex Hospital.
The coroner said a delay in getting a blood transfusion for Evan caused his death. He said medical staff failed to appreciate the severity of his symptoms and there was a lack of understanding of sickle cell disease. He said he couldn't record a verdict of neglect because Evan did receive basic medical care, but it was the wrong care for him.
Sickle cell disease is common in those with African and Caribbean heritage. The inquest heard nursing staff did not have specific training in how to manage it, despite serving an area with a large population from these communities.
We really do need to ensure that such deaths don't continue to happen. And it is unfortunately very common and regular for patients with sickle cell disorder to experience such problems.
We still have a lot of questions unanswered. Nothing is going to bring him back. So if it's bringing awareness of how patients like him should be treated in hospital, that would be a good thing, yeah.
The hospital have now apologised to Evan's family and say they recognise his care should have been better. They also say they've already made changes to try and make sure this never happens again. Katie Barnfield, ITV News.
Less than a week away from the first major easing of lockdown restrictions, the focus is on how to keep Londoners safe as we start to get out more. Vaccine passports are being trialled at some big events in the capital. The FA Cup semi-final in a few weeks' time is one of them. Here's Rags Martel.
Remember this? Crowds and cheering. Well, next week, Wembley will welcome back some spectators. Only 4,000 will be allowed to watch the FA Cup semi-final for a test event organised by the government. And later this month, 3,000 people will take part in a trial run for the London Marathon.
What would a successful test mean? Do you know what that means?
So at this stage, no, we don't, because we pass the data to the government and the scientists. And I think that they have various different events and each event has different metrics that they're testing. But it's a much bigger piece here about how society can open up and how we can get back to a more normal life, whatever that might be from the 21st of June.
Treading softly, the Prime Minister on what way people can prove they're vaccinated or COVID-free.
I think we're also going to look at the role of a number of signals that you can give that you're not contagious.
He stopped short of saying COVID passport, a controversial issue among his own MPs and Labour.
I think it is discriminatory to ask somebody to present a digital ID card, which is a vaccine passport. Many people will have been led to believe that as we gradually ease out of lockdown, we're going back to some form of normal life. That's what Boris Johnson promised us.
Whatever method is chosen, it could also be your passport back to the pub. But the hospitality industry has its own worries about how this will work.
The key concern is around how can they police this, the cost of policing it, and the implications of policing it when you've got a significant minority of customers who are opposed to this themselves.
Whatever happens, steps are being made to return back to normal. But it'll be a marathon, not a sprint. Rags Martel, ITV News.
And finally, the picture of a Second World War veteran has been beamed onto a billboard in Leicester Square today to mark his 100th birthday. Charlie Pallett has raised more than £27,000 for wounded soldiers by recording his favourite wartime song, Keep On Right to the End of the Road. It will be played for 10 seconds of every minute throughout the day. Here's the weather now with Sally.
Making the most of it, whatever the weather. Octopus Energy sponsors ITV London weekday weather.
Hello and a very good evening to you. If you're wondering why it felt so chilly today, we had a high of around 8 degrees in London. That's already below average, but with that Arctic air, it felt closer to between freezing and 4 degrees, so really chilly. And we've got more chilly weather tonight, a frosty start tomorrow morning, but also plenty of sunshine out there. Things are going to get slightly warmer over the next few days, but then things should tail off again, I'm afraid, on the temperature front for Saturday. So out there tonight, mostly dry. We should have quite a lot of clear skies, those winds easing off, all setting us us up for a very cold start tomorrow morning. A widespread frost expected, lows there of -1 to -3. But despite that chilly start tomorrow, we should also have plenty of sunshine to greet you as well. Nice and bright out there, and continuing so for much of the day. Probably a bit more cloud bubbling up as we go into the afternoon, but the wind staying light, slightly more from a northwesterly flow, so not quite as bitter, even though it's still, as I said, below average, highs of 7 to 9 degrees. Here's the outlook for you. Looking quite cloudy for Thursday and Friday, perhaps a bit brighter at times. The temperatures picking up and then tailing away again for the start of the weekend, possibly a bit wetter as well. I'll see you later on. Good night and sleep well.
Octopus Energy sponsors ITV London weekday weather.
And that's it from us. We're back during Good Morning Britain from 6 a.m. For now, though, good night.